Hi, my name is Andrew Luttrell, and this is my presentation on government cheese for my microeconomics class. Starting off just with an outline, I want to talk about sort of the story of this whole debacle, and then also look at where we are now with it, with the situation, and then also, of course, do an economic investigation of this story and see what we can glean from it. The main economic points I want to talk about are equilibrium, and then surplus and deficit, as well as government intervention from our most recent topic in the class. So starting off really just with the story of this whole thing, in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, the United States was suffering from a national dairy shortage, and the dairy producers, the farmers, were not able to produce enough dairy to meet demand. And that was due to a number of factors, but mostly they just were not able to afford to make more dairy than they were. And so that caused a deficit. And that actually caused the price of dairy to just balloon. And it caused a lot of instability. And the Carter administration, Jimmy Carter and his folks in 1977, they viewed this as such a threat to the American household that they ended up pouring about $2 billion into the dairy industry over the next 4 years. And that came in the form of a lot of subsidies that were developed and a lot of programs that are still continued today to allow dairy farmers to be government funded and subsidized. And this has actually led to a number of farmers realizing that, oh, I can make a lot of money off of this. And so they just ramp up production to ridiculous amounts, producing way more than is demanded. And the government has agreed to subsidize this dairy. And so the best way to keep it from going bad, or to keep them from just wasting money on dairy that nobody's going to consume, was to actually solidify this milk and to make it into cheese. Cheese is more chemically stable, it's more physically stable, it is easier to transport, it's a solid, and then of course it has a longer shelf life than milk. And so the result of this is that underneath the state of Missouri, there actually are about 1.4 billion pounds of surplus cheese sitting in limestone caves. And as that cheese was beginning to be produced to such an extent that the government realized it was getting ridiculous, this man, Ronald Reagan, he set up programs because the leaders with him in the FDA, they were telling him that we have too much cheese and we can't store it all, and this isn't a stable method of holding on to cheese. And so they began public distribution, and they started what's called TFAP, which is the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program. And the idea was just to get this government cheese into people's hands. And it was offered to businesses and restaurants and individuals, and you could sign up for this program and just be given government cheese because we have way too much of it and we need to get rid of it, and we need people to eat this or else we'll have to throw it away kind of situation. And so looking at the present, we still have TFAP, we still have a lot of those government subsidies that are allowing for that overproduction. But as well as having those things, we have a decline in demand for dairy, and that's connected to a number of economic factors, as well as a growing percentage of Americans. I think I read 36 recently, 36% of Americans today are lactose intolerant. And so that would obviously decline their demand for lactose products. Looking at this story economically, you can easily see the power of deficit and inflation, as well as government intervention, and then also more recently, the overproduction and surplus. and then the government, how do they respond to this thing? And so looking at deficit and inflation real quick, this is just a drawing from my notes about how deficit works, one of the first lectures from the first week, I think. And this just explains really quickly the quantity supplied being less than the quantity demanded because of the inability to supply more, the farmers couldn't afford to supply more. And so when you introduce that price floor as shown on the left there, that increases the price, which allows the quantity supplied to jump up. And if the quantity demanded does not also jump up, then you end up with that surplus. And so to meet the quantity supplied, the quantity demanded has to increase dramatically. And with milk, it seems to have worked, but with cheese, it didn't. And so with that being the case, we've got this overproduction and this surplus in cheese and in milk. And this surplus just keeps getting bigger and bigger as more production occurs and as less demand occurs. And so sort of the problem moving forward with this is how to use up the existing cheese without creating more demand. Going back to this one, you can see how with the milk, as the supply increases, so does the demand. But with the cheese, it doesn't seem to be the case. And so I think really trying to figure out how to promote the use of that government cheese. Obviously, they've done a great job. They have whole advertising schemes. You can go visit the cheese caves in Missouri, but that's sort of where we're at. And these are my sources. And I had a lot of fun researching this. It was really cool to learn this story and also to get to use themes from class in looking at this. So with that, I say thank you and goodbye.
No flying games in class.